In this episode, we're going to take a part of security that often feels invisible to beginners and show why it is one of the most practical areas where small choices create big differences in real risk. How sessions are controlled after a user has authenticated. Many people think authentication is the moment you type a password or approve a prompt, and then the rest is just normal use. But systems do not stay safe simply because a login happened once. After authentication, most systems create a session, which is essentially a temporary, ongoing state that tells the system you are still the same user and that you do not need to prove yourself from scratch on every click. Sessions are crucial for usability, but they also create opportunities for abuse, because if an attacker can steal or reuse a session, they may not need to defeat your password or MFA at all. This episode explains timeouts, reuse, lockouts, and risk signals in a way that helps you understand why session control is a major part of access security. A session is best understood as a shared agreement between a client and a service that says this user has authenticated and is authorized to continue making requests without repeatedly presenting full credentials. That agreement is usually represented by some kind of session identifier or token that the client presents with each request. The system checks that identifier and treats the requests as belonging to the authenticated user as long as certain conditions remain true. The security challenge is that a session identifier becomes valuable because it is like a stamped pass that allows entry without repeating the full proof of identity. If the session identifier is stolen, copied, or used from a different context, an attacker may be able to impersonate the user until the session expires or is invalidated. This is why session control is not just a convenience configuration. It is a protective boundary that determines how long trust lasts, where it can travel, and what must happen to refresh it. Timeouts are one of the simplest session controls to understand, and they are powerful because they limit how long a stolen or unattended session remains useful. An idle timeout ends a session after a period of inactivity, which helps protect against someone walking away from a device or leaving a session open on a shared or public system. An absolute timeout ends a session after a fixed maximum duration, even if the user is active, which limits how long any single session can persist. Beginners sometimes think timeouts are only about convenience, but they are about reducing exposure time. If an attacker steals a session token, the attacker's window of use is bounded by the timeout. If a user forgets to log out, the timeout can close the session automatically. The trade-off is usability, because short timeouts can frustrate users and encourage risky workarounds. Good session design balances risk and workflow by adjusting timeout policies based on context and sensitivity. Session reuse is another concept that matters because it describes how the system treats tokens or session identifiers over time and across contexts. A simple form of reuse is when a session token remains valid across browser restarts or device restarts, which can be convenient but increases risk if the device is lost or compromised. Another form is when session tokens can be used from multiple locations without challenge, which increases risk if an attacker captures the token and uses it elsewhere. Some systems allow multiple concurrent sessions for the same account, which can be necessary for legitimate work but can also mask unauthorized access if you do not monitor it. The key beginner idea is that reuse is a form of persistent trust, and persistent trust can be abused. A safer approach is to limit reuse for high-risk accounts and sensitive actions, and to require fresh proof of identity when conditions change. When you hear about stolen browser cookies or session hijacking, the underlying issue is often that session reuse was too permissive or that tokens were not adequately protected. Re-authentication is the mechanism that restores confidence when risk increases or when an action is especially sensitive. Instead of assuming that a session established hours ago is still trustworthy for every action, the system can require the user to reprove identity, often with stronger factors, before proceeding. This is common for actions like changing account settings, modifying payment information, accessing highly sensitive data, or performing administrative functions. Re-authentication is not the same as logging in again from scratch because it can be targeted at specific actions rather than ending the whole session. The security value is that it reduces the damage of a stolen session token. Even if an attacker has a session, they may be blocked from high-impact actions because the system requires fresh proof that the real user is present. For beginners, it helps to think of re-authentication as a checkpoint inside the system, not just at the front door. It is a way to keep usability while still putting extra protection around the most dangerous actions. Lockouts are often discussed in authentication, but they also connect to session control because they affect how the system responds to suspicious access attempts. A lockout typically occurs after repeated failed authentication attempts, and its purpose is to slow down online guessing. However, lockouts must be handled carefully because they can be abused to cause denial of service, where an attacker intentionally triggers lockouts to prevent real users from accessing accounts. A safer strategy often combines rate limiting, progressive delays, and intelligent thresholds rather than harsh lockouts that are easy to weaponize. Lockouts can also apply to session behavior, such as invalidating sessions after suspicious activity, which can protect users if their session token has been stolen. The important beginner lesson is that lockouts are not simply about punishment for mistakes, because they are a defensive mechanism that must be designed to resist attacker manipulation. A lockout policy that is too aggressive can harm availability, while one that is too weak can allow guessing. Risk signals are the information the system uses to decide whether a session should continue normally, require re-authentication, or be terminated. Risk signals can include unusual login location, unusual device, unusual time, unusual behavior patterns, sudden changes in network characteristics, or signs of automated activity. The key idea is that session trust is not a binary state where you are either trusted forever or not trusted at all. Trust can be continuously evaluated based on signals that suggest the risk level has changed. For example, if a session that usually operates from one region suddenly appears from a distant location, that may indicate token theft or account compromise. If a session that usually performs routine actions suddenly attempts administrative changes, that may indicate misuse. By using risk signals, systems can adapt their security posture in real time, requiring additional proof when risk is higher and allowing smoother access when risk is lower. Beginners should see this as a practical application of adaptive security, not as a mysterious advanced technique. A common misunderstanding is thinking that sessions are safe as long as passwords are strong and MFA is enabled, but session theft bypasses those protections because the attacker does not need to authenticate again. That is why protecting session tokens is crucial. While we are not focusing on implementation details, the conceptual protections include ensuring tokens are not exposed unnecessarily, ensuring sessions are tied to expected contexts, and ensuring that sessions expire or require re-authentication when conditions change. Another misunderstanding is assuming logging out is always optional. But logging out is a deliberate security action because it invalidates session state and reduces the chance of reuse by someone else. On shared devices or public environments, failing to log out is one of the most common real-world causes of account exposure. Even in private environments, leaving sessions open increases risk if a device is stolen or compromised. The system can help with timeouts, but user behavior and clear processes still matter. Session control also interacts with user experience, and beginners should understand that usability failures often become security failures. If session timeouts are too short and re-authentication is too frequent, users may seek workarounds, like using less secure devices, saving credentials in unsafe ways, or avoiding security prompts by staying permanently logged in. If session controls are too lax, users may be safe day-to-day, but attackers have more time to exploit stolen tokens and to operate quietly. The goal is to tune controls to match risk. High-risk accounts and sensitive resources deserve stricter session lifetimes and stronger re-authentication checkpoints. Lower-risk usage might tolerate longer sessions with monitoring and risk-based triggers. This is a policy and governance decision as much as it is a technical one, because it depends on what the organization is protecting and what trade-offs it accepts. A well-run environment makes secure behavior easy without making routine work unbearable. Another key concept is that sessions can multiply, and multiplication can hide problems if you do not manage it. Many users have multiple devices, multiple browsers, and multiple applications, each maintaining its own session. That means a user might have several active sessions at once, and if one of those sessions is compromised, the user may not notice because their normal sessions continue to function. This is why visibility into session activity is valuable. Systems can provide ways to see active sessions and terminate them, and security teams can monitor for unusual concurrent sessions or sudden spikes in session creation. From an exam perspective, scenarios where an account shows activity from multiple locations at once often point to stolen credentials or stolen session tokens, and the appropriate response often involves invalidating sessions and requiring re-authentication rather than only changing a password. The broader lesson is that identity security includes controlling not only login events, but also ongoing session state. As you tie these ideas together, session control becomes a clear strategy for managing trust over time. Timeouts shrink the window of exposure. Reuse controls reduce the portability and persistence of trust. Re-authentication adds checkpoints for sensitive actions and changing conditions. Lockouts and rate controls reduce online guessing and suspicious access, and risk signals allow the system to adapt based on what it observes. These concepts are easier when you think like an attacker because attackers prefer quiet persistence. They love long-lived sessions, reusable tokens, and environments that never challenge them again after the first compromise. Your session controls are the guardrails that prevent that quiet persistence from becoming normal. They force attackers to keep proving themselves, to keep evading detection, and to keep operating under time pressure, which increases the chance they will be noticed and stopped. In other words, session control is a way of making trust conditional rather than permanent. By the end of this episode, you should feel confident explaining that authentication is not a single moment, because trust continues through sessions, and sessions must be governed with the same seriousness as logins. Timeouts reduce exposure time. Reuse decisions shape how portable and persistent sessions are. Re-authentication protects high-impact actions and changing contexts. Lockouts and rate controls slow guessing and suspicious behavior. And risk signals help systems adjust defenses when something seems off. When you see questions about session hijacking, stolen cookies, repeated prompts, strange location changes, or long-lived access, you can connect them to these controls and reason about the best response. Session control is where security becomes practical and continuous because it manages the everyday reality that people stay logged in, devices get lost, and attackers look for ways to act without being challenged. Mastering this concept makes your understanding of access control far more complete and far more useful.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.